Welcome to JR's Texan Consort. Today's episode is called Good versus Unforgiven. Now, Jimmy is going to report the story as best he can. Unfortunately, technology is not working very well for me to actually read the account, so I'm just going to go ahead and rehearse it. The morning of the 28th, JR wakes up. At 4:30. He has 5 a.m. practice over at the ceiling with Bill Holden. He goes over to swimming practice. Halfway through swimming practice, they decide to talk. How are things with you and Karen Crider? I don't know, Bill, JR said. We've had a couple of friendly dates, but I think it's just leading to nowhere. I told you, didn't I? Bill Holden said. She's going to break your heart. I'm warning you. She's going to break your heart. At the same time that morning, Jim and Claude get ready to go to New York City. Their plan was to enjoy the day there before Jim had to report to the White House for his interview. JR goes through his day of Spanish class, and then he goes onward to public speaking class while his dad is relaxing at the Waldorf Astoria. The next day, JR wakes up and has breakfast with Antonio Gomez. Antonio told JR that he was concerned about how his relationship with Karen was working out. Said he'd heard the stories about Karen and Brad. JR went through government class where Jack Fitzmiller was lecturing about public policy. After that, he decides to have lunch with Andrew Selford. And he has Ken McDonald record the Andrew House show today. Jim shows up at his interview at the White House, hoping that it would be with White House Chief of Staff Mark McLarty. Unfortunately, Mark McLarty was tied up in daily affairs with President Clinton. So, it was he was set up with an underling named Harold Ickes. After the interview, Jim was so disgusted that when he went back to the Washington, D.C. Capitol Hilton, he told Claude that his best solution was to get drunk. But Claude reminds him that they returned to Odessa and Midland the next morning. On the morning of the 30th, JR wakes up early once again at 4:30. He has swimming practice with Brent Clark and Charlie Nation. And they also have breakfast together at Crockett House. Well, I'm glad you didn't dump Karen Crider, Charlie Nation said. "Aw, back off, Charlie," Brent said. They've had a few friendly dates, but it's going nowhere. Don't think it's going to be all that good between between JR and Karen. I don't know, Charlie said. There's a chance. JR went through Spanish class, and then afterwards agreed to meet with Karen for lunch. Hey, let's go, Karen said, pulling up to the student union building. And JR gets into the car. You seem happy. She drives off of the campus. JR, do you ever think about getting away? Well, yeah, Karen, I go home on the weekends, JR said. I mean, get away from West Texas. You know, go to the East Coast, or even go visit the Bible land in Israel. Believe it or not, Karen, I do think about it. Thank God. I was worried that Jack Fitzmiller had turned you into a communist pig. No. But you have to understand, my studies in public affairs, I am going to have to get away quite a bit. That night, JR went to his weekly Cheesecake Toastmasters, where earlier that semester he had been elected vice president for public relations. The next day, Jim and Betsy, Jim and Claude, Jim, Betsy, and Elizabeth drove to Abilene to catch a chartered jet to Waco. JR goes through his government and Spanish class. Luckily, in government class, discussing American public policy was not Jack Fitzmiller. He was away presenting an academic paper in Arizona. Instead, it was Frederick McKay, one of the lecturers in the Department of Political Science. And JR would run into him several times during his public affairs studies. After a while, Jim and Betsy and Elizabeth got in the jet and departed for Waco, seeing as JR was going to be swimming in the Baylor Invitational. That night, while Jim is hanging out with his teammates at the hotel near Baylor University, Jim, Betsy, and Greg Sanders are partying, talking. Greg Sanders says that he may be able to give Jim a leg up for any appointment he wants. The next day was a swim meet, which began at 10. JR was pleased that Brant Clark won the silver medal in diving, but he was only able to win the bronze medal in swimming. His father didn't say much to him at the time. Jim was already upset as it was that week that Ken wasn't showing up at his baptism, and that Jim Bob wasn't until he was coached finally by Brad to attend. Jim only said a few words to JR. JR could tell he was not pleased that he only won bronze. Betsy, however, seemed proud of his son, but they had to hurry up and go quick to the airport to fly back to Midland to attend the Greg Sanders party. That night, Jim attends dinner in Waco with his teammates. He spends most of his time with Dave Smith, as he notices that Charlie Nation is too busy talking and impressing the girls on the team. That night at the Greg Sanders team party, Jim reveals that he wants either a position in Congress or at the Small Business Administration. Don't worry about Joe LaFalce, Greg said, referring to the congressman from New York. I can deal with him. He owes me a favor from back in '89, and so it's time for me to cash in on the favor. JR returns back that night. He's in the room by himself as Kevin McDonald was flying to West Virginia for tomorrow's soccer tournament. The next morning, at 7:45, his Uncle Carl picks him up in his slick white 1982 Chrysler. They go to the First United Methodist Church. Walking in, Karen confronts JR. You sure you haven't been baptized before? Oh man, Karen, lay off, I haven't been, JR said. Well, Brad and Jim Bob showed some concern. I haven't been, JR said. After the sermon, JR was presented to be sprinkled and baptized at the Methodist Church. Afterwards, Jim talked to Brad, Jim Bob, and Karen for about 20 minutes before Carl took him back to the dorm. Carl comes and sits with JR on his dorm room bed. Oh man, people haven't been supporting you that good lately. Your father's too busy touring around the country trying to get some appointment with Bill Clinton. And your mom's been doing her best trying to keep up with him. I know. And my friends. Oh, don't worry about those fuss buckets, JR. Your father's one of them too. He said, your father is one of the reasons why I haven't been coming around all these years. But I'm here if you need me. You know that. Why me, Carl? Because unlike the rest of the family, you are not like your father. And the sooner people begin to realize that, the better. You're really something, JR. I want to have as much to do with you as possible. Kevin McDonald returns back to the dorm at 3 o'clock that afternoon. We won by the skin of our teeth, Kevin said. What's going on with you? Oh, dinner with Karen Crider. Oh, okay. At 6:30, Karen Crider shows up at Gordon Hall. Hello, JR. Hey, Karen. You seemed happy today at the baptism. I was. I was glad that Jim Bob showed up. Jim Bob's alright. I know you've been having stress points with him because of the problems between me and Ken and Brad. You know, Ken's the guilty party here. Jim Bob been talking to you? JR said. Yeah, we talked. While you were going in Waco? What's the problem? Jim Bob's trying to play both sides. He likes you, Karen. He likes you a lot. Well, I didn't think that you could be so jealous. No, I'm pleased. Don't worry about it. Jim Bob's okay. Hope you've enjoyed JR Texan Consort. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, become a part